Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'll give it a minute or two as people continue joining. In the meantime, I will launch a poll for everyone to fill out. And while you're filling out the poll, if you would also like to, you can share in the chat where you're joining from today. So I will do that as well. All right, so I can see there's a couple of answers coming through from the poll. And so the questions were about, have you used Protocol Studio before? So it looks like most people who have answered have used Protocol Studio before, so that's great to hear. Um, and then for the people who have, a couple have created protocols, a couple have only um, browsed the published content. So we'll be covering a few different areas today. But that's great to see. So thank you everyone for who answered the poll. I'm going to end that now. Hi, Livia. Welcome from Romania. And then we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Julia. I'm a scientific engagement manager at Protocol Studio. And this is our introductory webinar today. So what I have planned is I'll start off talking a little bit about why methods and protocols are important and why sharing them is important. Then we'll go into talking about what Protocol Studio is. We'll have a couple of slides on that, and then about halfway through, I will jump out of the slides and into Protocol Studio to show you how it works. But we've got a lot of people who have used Protocol Studio today. So some things might be familiar if you have used the platform before, or you might learn something that you haven't figured out yet. A couple of housekeeping options to start us off. So this webinar is being recorded. The recording has already started. And everyone who registered will receive that link to the recording as well as the slides that I'm showing today. Closed captioning should also be enabled if you would like to use them. And if English isn't your first language, you can turn on translations in the captions as well. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the session, and there'll also be a webinar feedback survey. So during the presentation, if you're thinking of any questions or feedback that might be helpful for us to include in future webinars, there will be an opportunity for that. And if you do want to enable translations in your Zoom window, you can click on Show Captions at the bottom there, and then you'll receive a pop-up that says, and you can choose what language you would like the captions to be shown in. All right, so let's get started. So really one of the reasons that I'm here today talking to you all is that we unfortunately have the situation that sufficient information for repeating experiments is often lacking. And so we can see some complaints here from researchers that they've posted on what used to be Twitter. My personal favorite is the one in the middle, where we can see that there's a citation chain back where multiple citations say devices were fabricated as previously described. And then when this researcher got back to the original paper, it said devices were fabricated with conventional methods. So That's not very helpful and can be incredibly frustrating when you're trying to reuse or build upon someone else's research and there are key pieces of information missing. So, more broadly, what that can cause is it leads to a lack of reproducibility in research. I won't dwell on that too much today. I think that's probably something we've all heard a lot about over the past decade or so. If you haven't, there's various articles on the subject that you can read about it. But this is a recent publication that I've pulled out from last year. And I thought that was a really nice quote from one of the researchers who was interviewed. And I'll start at the bottom of the quote so we can see that he says, when referring to reproducibility, that these problems demand actions such as open sharing of data and protocols. And that is absolutely one of the ways to improve reproducibility. But what I want to really call out is this portion at the top here, in that there are structural weaknesses in the way that we we produce, document, and communicate science. And so if we think about that, reproducibility doesn't start at the publication when you're trying to communicate your research out. It starts in the lab, in the field, at your computer when you're starting to produce that research. And so that's where we're trying to help with Protocol Studio. One other thing to keep in mind, and I do want to highlight that this conversation isn't only about other people trying to build on or reproduce your work. Most of the time, the person who's going to be reusing, modifying your methods is going to be you, or at the very least, your very close collaborators. So if you do an experiment 6 months down the line, you might not remember what exactly changed or which version of the protocol you were following. I know that everyone has their own methods of documentation. This can vary from lab to lab. Um, Back in my PhD, I had a colleague and he wrote all of his methods down on pieces of paper towel, and he had a big stack of paper towels in the lab that had his methods on them. But wherever you fall on that spectrum of how you are documenting your methods, think about what that will look like when it comes the time to share those methods openly. Because when it comes to open sharing of data, protocols, various things to support publications, what we hear is that people are on board with the idea of doing that, but of course, everyone's very busy and it can be a big task to go back and pull all of that information together to make it openly available to other people. But try and think about it a little bit differently. So if you are really documenting your methods clearly when you're doing them, you're going to save future you time when you are wanting to share those methods openly later. So it's benefiting you, and then the rest of the research community can benefit as well. So that's really the mission of Protocol Studio, which is to make it easy for you to share those method details. So before, during, and after publication. To enable that, there are two sides to Protocol Studio. To help you during method development, and that's the private side of the platform where we're an experimental workflow tool. And there you can document and track how your method evolves as you are optimizing it. So tracking those incremental changes. You can do it collaboratively within your lab and also across global collaborations as well. And then, as I said, the idea is that if you are using the private side of the platform, once it comes time to share openly, it's very easy to do that. You can basically click a button, move through a couple of steps, and you get a published protocol with a DOI that people can cite and reuse. And so when you're doing that, you would publish in our methods repository. And so when you do that, you can link your methods to your research papers, and it allows really clear credit for that method development. So in our methods repository, there are two types of content there. So anything that is published via Protocol Studio is open access, so it's free to publish and free for people to read those protocols that are published via Protocol Studio. What we also do is we host content from external methods journals from within Springer Nature. So that would be something like Springer Protocols. And what that does is it allows the Springer protocols to benefit from the really dynamic and interactive format that Protocol Studio has, which I'll talk about a little bit on the next slide. But something to keep in mind is that the hosted content, it retains the access rights from when it was originally published. So some of the external content is subscription based. So that's something to keep in mind when you are searching. So when we look at the private side of the platform, there is a lot of functionality that enables these protocols to be shared in a way where you can highlight relevant information that will improve reproducibility. And what I also want to highlight is that unlike something that can be relatively static, like a Word or PDF document, the protocols on Protocol Studio are very dynamic and interactive. So you can do things like add what we call components. This is highlighting specific amounts that can be scaled up and down. You can have tables with formulas, plate maps, images, videos. Um, all of this detail can be in the protocols. We also have AI tools to help you with drafting and troubleshooting those protocols. You can then turn a protocol into a checklist. So when you are executing that method, you can document exactly how it was executed. And then all of this happens in a collaborative space. And so you can choose for that to be controlled collaboration privately or really public and open as well. Then when you have a method to share, either because you just want to make it available to the community, or if you are publishing a manuscript and you want to link that method to your manuscript, you can go to your private protocol that's already on the platform, um, click the publish button, and then when that's made public, you can include it in a manuscript like we see in this example here. Um, and so what this is called and what I'll talk about that's shown here is something called modular publishing. And that's when we have the paper and then all of the research outputs associated with that paper. They could be things like methods, molecular structures, code, data, various things. All of those outputs or modules are linked back to the research paper. And we see a really nice example of modular publishing here. So this is a Nature Communications paper, and we can see that the expression constructs have been deposited on AdGene, the protocols on Protocols.io, and the molecular structure in the protein data bank. And so key there is that all of those different outputs have been deposited into the repositories that are specifically built for sharing that type of information. And so Protocol Studio is specifically built for sharing methods. I saw we have one raised hand. Um, oh no, someone, okay. I just saw I haven't been sharing the slides. That is worrying. Okay, well, let's fix that. Okay. I'm sorry about that, guys. Well, what we can do as well is we run this webinar similarly every month. And so I can share a link as well to one of the past webinars where you will be able to see the slides. You'll also receive them afterwards. So you can go through them when watching the recording. But apologies. Okay, so some people have been seeing the slides for the whole time because I did just share them now. Okay. Maybe maybe it was just you, Livia. Hopefully everyone else was seeing the presentation. Okay, maybe it was just Livia. Okay. I'm glad Livia, try and join and see if you can see the slides again. All right, so I see there's been one other question that's come through. So while we're paused, I'll go ahead and answer that. So does protocols, so I'm assuming you're referring to protocols.io, which is the tool we're talking about today. Does protocols.io work only for Springer Nature related journals? And is it only accessible for those with a subscription? So I'll touch on that a little bit later, but to say now, no, it doesn't only work for Springer Nature related journals. You can link a method to a journal from any publisher, and we are actually many publishers outside of Springer Nature do recommend that you put your methods on Protocol Studio. We also have a partnership with PLOS. They have a specific journal type. It's called Lab Protocol. And if you want to publish in that journal, they actually require that you deposit your methods on Protocol Studio. So we have examples of that. It's not just Springer Nature journals. And then the other question, is it only accessible for those with a subscription? So there are two sides of the platform. I actually probably should have mentioned that earlier. So coming to the public side of the platform, so anyone, as I mentioned, it's so free to read content published via Protocol Studio. It's free to publish on Protocol Studio. Um, you can use the private side of the platform. I'll move back to that side a little bit. You can use the private side of the platform. There are some limitations to the private side of the platform. So you can have two private protocols at a time, but you can publish as many of them as you want. If you wanted another private protocol slot, you can just publish one of your protocols. Um, and so the free side of Protocol Studio is really for open research. What I'll talk about a little bit later is there are many universities and some funders as well that provide Premium Protocol Studio for you. So there's no cost to the individual researcher. Okay, it looks like you can see the slides now, Olivia. That's great. Okay, moving on. So we were talking a little bit about modular publishing. And so there are many benefits of taking that approach. So one of them, within the context of methods sharing, is having first author recognition for that method development. And so because we think about the paper and the protocol being separate research outputs, you can have distinct author lists for that. So this is the same paper that I showed on the previous slide, and we can see that Kelsey Ramirez, she's fourth author on the paper, but she played a really key role in developing, there were actually two protocols that were linked within that paper. And so she can be first author on that protocol, and she can list that on her CV, track the metrics that are specifically associated with her first author research output associated with the paper. So it allows her to more clearly really demonstrate what her contribution was. Another benefit is you can make sure that your methods are open access. So if we think about open access, you might not always be the person deciding whether the paper that you're contributing to is going to be published in an open access journal. But even if it is published in something like a subscription-based journal, so we can see that example here, if you are putting those protocols on protocols.io, then at least the methods are open access and people can refer back to and find those methods independently from the paper. One of the things that is also possible on protocols.io is this dynamic versioning and forking functionality. So this is where we make it really easy for you to build upon the published content on the platform via publishing a new version or publishing what we call a fork. And that is where you are adapting someone else's protocol and building upon it. And I'll show you some more examples of that in a moment. But this is where we can see what's possible if you are publishing on protocols.io. So in this example, these researchers, they published their method. It was about isolating COVID from wastewater to detect the virus levels. And they published it in a preprint. And then alongside that preprint, they published version 1 of their protocol. So it's a very fast-moving field at the time. And by the time they came to publish the associated journal article, they'd already made some improvements upon their protocol. And so they could publish a new version on protocols.io and then link that to the article. And then, of course, even after the journal article is published, they could publish version 3. So we know that just because you publish a paper doesn't mean that the research is going to stop. You might continue improving upon that method, and you can share those improvements with the community and get credit for those improvements as well. And then because it's on the platform, anyone else, however long into the future, can come and update that and build upon that method as well for their specific situation. So on the topic of creating new versions on protocols.io, one of the questions we get is around if a protocol has a DOI when it's published, what happens to that DOI if I'm creating a new version? And so what I can say is that each version on protocols.io has a different DOI. But if someone follows a link, for example, to the DOI from version 1 of a protocol, so that's what we can see here on the slide. These authors have connected their methods to this research paper, and they've included the DOI in their paper to version 1. But however many years later, if people find this paper, click on this link, and they're taken to version 1, they'll be notified that there actually is a newer version of that protocol or collection of protocols available to view. And then they can either view the version that was published at the time to see what it was, and then they can also view the newer version. They can also go in and compare what's changed over time as well. And I will show some of that when we move into the platform. But just to tie that up, there are a lot of benefits to publishing your methods openly alongside your papers. And one of them as well is people can find those methods independently of your papers, and it's another avenue for people to find your research. And so this was a really nice quote from a researcher that was using protocols.io quite a lot. And so he said that 80% of his recent collaborations were as a direct result of sharing publicly on protocols.io. And so it is a really nice way for people to find you, find your research, and connect. What I'll also say, where the biggest benefit to you comes is where you use the public and private sides of protocols.io together. And this is where you might see kind of how they all work together really well. So you might start off by searching for a published protocol on protocols.io that you can reuse and build upon. You can find that, bring it into your private workspace where you can optimize for your specific research circumstances. And then you can build upon that on the private side and then share and publish that when you're ready to do so. And then other people can start that process. All right. So what I'll do now is I will shortly move out of the slides and move on to Protocol Studio. Um, I'll start off by giving you a little bit of a tour of the published content, and then I'll start talking about the private side of the platform and how you can get started to putting a protocol on the platform. So I will stop sharing now, and then I will start sharing my other screen. One moment. All right, we are now on the home page of Protocol Studio. And you can start off by searching some of the public content. And so what I'm going to search for is this. And then, of course, we can see what the results of our search are. And so these are published open access protocols. And so we can see the one that I'm interested in is down here. But in our search, what we're also seeing is, so this is the hosted content from external platforms. So if you are specifically looking for the open access content, what you can do as well is you can go into advanced search, and then you can click on open access if you want to only view those open access protocols. And so this is the protocol that I'm going to show you today. So it's quite a popular protocol on the platform. So we can see some of the stats associated with that there. And so for those of you who've already searched the public content, you might be familiar with the different elements of a protocol in Protocol Studio, but I'll run through that quickly now for those who haven't. So we can see at the top that this is version 3 of the published protocol. And so the authors published the original in 2018 and then made updates since then. So I can go back, click to view any of the previous versions. I can also click here and compare what's changed between version 1 to version 3. We also provide translations for the published content. Excuse me. And so all protocols, when they are published, are automatically translated using AI into these 5 languages that you can see here. So you can go and view that for yourself if you know one of those languages. We can also see here that there is a link to an eLife journal. So we talked about that people can link their protocols to their papers. That's not a requirement to publish on Protocol Studio. You can publish a method standalone, but if you do link it to a peer-reviewed research paper, we put a little badge here at the top of your journal, and then people can click on this and be taken to your paper. So if I clicked on this link, I would see that in that paper, they've said, full methods can be found on protocols.io. And then they've put in this TOI to the protocols.io protocol there. We can also see some of the options here, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But let's go down via the table of contents to the steps of the protocol. And so we can see it's in this very structured format that's instructional and step by step. And there's lots of nice notes and context there so that people can reproduce that method. Um, People can come and they can comment and ask for clarification on individual steps as well. And so we can see that here. I think one of them, so this one's just kind of correcting a typo. So it's nice to be able to come in and see those comments and what other people have tried, and if the authors have replied back to that, which sometimes they do, sometimes it's other people who are using the protocol who comment and reply back. And what we can also see is we can also see on this tab here, so you can make sure to explore these, how that protocol has evolved over time. So we know that there was multiple versions already. If we click, oops, so you can open that. If we click on this, we can see how people have created forks of that version. And so the fork is where this protocol is adapted for a different purpose rather than simply an improvement upon the method. As we can see, they've created an abbreviated version of this protocol. So this one's over 100 steps. And so someone has created, oops, should be this one, yep. So someone has created an abbreviated fork of that protocol. And so when someone creates a fork, we can see really clearly at the top a link back to the original method that it's built upon. So what I'll do now is I'll move into the private side of the platform. So if you aren't registered, you would probably see a sign up button in the top here. I'm obviously already signed in, so I can't see that. But when you create your account, you'll be prompted to create a workspace. And that is your private space for storing your protocols before they're published. So this is my workspace. Obviously, I have some things in there. So this is my protocols. We've also got run records, which I'll talk about. And I'm also a member of multiple workspaces. So we can see here on the left, these are all of the workspaces that I'm a part of. I'm in a lot because I work for Protocols.io, but you might be in a handful of workspaces. And so you could work in a workspace by yourself, but if you are doing your research collaboratively, you might want to invite other people into that workspace, your supervisor, or if you are a professor, maybe the members of your research group, anyone else you're collaborating with. And if you have created the workspace, you can click here and access different workspace settings. So I can open up the administration settings, see who's in my workspace. These are some of my colleagues, and I can invite other people as well. So by email, someone else on Protocols Today, or I can email them separately a link if I wanted to. If you are going to be inviting, multiple people into your workspace, what you might want to think about as well are the different access settings that you might want to set. So I think these default access settings can work really well. I would recommend starting with them. But if you did have a specific situation that you wanted to accommodate, you can explore these here as well. So for example, if you were a PI or a senior postdoc, and you're the admin of the workspace, and maybe you're inviting a bunch of junior research students in, and just as a precaution, maybe you would want to turn off publishing for them and only have the admins be able to publish. That's something that you can do here in these settings. One other thing to keep in mind is that a workspace can be completely private. And so this workspace is a private workspace. The only people who know that it exists are the people who I invite into it. But we can also have public workspaces. And so this is when the existence of your workspace is publicly visible in Protocols Studio search, in Google search. And so this is an example of a public workspace. And so this was a method development community. And so if I searched up coronavirus method development community on Google on protocols.io, I would see this information. So I could see some information about the workspace, all of the published protocols associated with that workspace, who's in it, and so discussions that are happening in the comments around those published protocols. And so you can do this if you are in a specific research area, so similar to this one, or some people create a public workspace for their research group so that all of the published protocols from their research group are contained in one place. Just because you have a a public workspace, it means people can see the published content here. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can go in and they can see the private unpublished protocols that are in that workspace. So you can set that up to be private to only you. So really, I would recommend the best way to start getting familiar with Protocol Studio if you do want to use it or publish on the platform is to just, of course, start creating a protocol. So there are a few different ways of doing that. And um, so I'll explain what those are now. So first of all, it's to build on the published content. So if we go to a protocol that's been published, I've picked this one. It's a really nice computational protocol that we can see here. And I can just click on this copy fork button. And so I won't run through the whole process, but if I make a fork, I'm going to have my own private editable copy of this protocol. So I can type in the steps, make whatever changes that I want, use it as kind of like a template or scaffold to develop my own protocol. Another option is that if you already have a method or protocol that you have drafted in, for example, a Word document or in a PDF, you want to bring that into the platform, put it into the structured dynamic protocols.io format. We do have a tool that can help you do that. So if I click on New and then Import a protocol, I can upload the file that I want to import. You can see it can be a variety of file types. So one of them, if you do have handwritten notes, you can take a photo of that as well. And that will convert that into a protocols.io protocol. And so I've got an example of what's possible here. So this is a PDF. So there's some information there. It is already in steps. And then using the importer, it creates something like this. So it's kind of put the information into the right places, the titles in the title section, the authors are in the authors section. We can see those steps are in the right places as well. And so this can save a lot of time rather than kind of redrafting your protocol within protocols.io. It is AI that parses your protocol and chooses where to put the information. So it's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. You'll definitely need to check to make sure all of the information has come across. And you might need to do a little bit of formatting as well, but it does do a pretty good job. Once it has imported your protocol, it's going to import text only. Text and images, but what it won't add is things that we have on protocols today that are called components. So this same protocol, actually what it was published as was this that we can see here. And so you can see some of that information is in notes. So times, amounts, concentrations, they're highlighted in these components. And then those things become a lot more interactive. So for example, these timers I could run as an actual timer in the run functionality. And I will run through that in a moment. One of the other options is you can, of course, just click New Protocol and it will create a blank protocol that you can edit as you want. So it would look something like this, and you can start inserting sections, inserting steps. But we also have AI tools to help you with creating a starting point or drafting your protocol. And so you'll see a button here. There's also one on the side. It will either say refine or generate. And by click on that, you can chat with AI to explain what kind of protocol you're looking for, and it will give you an outline that you can build upon. So, as with most AI tools, the quality of the prompt that you're putting in is tied to the quality of what you're going to get out. So, just as a recommendation, I've got an example here. I've just put it here so we can see it on the screen. This is not where you would normally put it. But an example of a poor prompt might be something like, how do I do immunofluorescence staining? But if you want a lot of details and a high quality protocol, a good prompt would be something like what we can see here. So we can see it's asking for immunofluorescence on specifically adherent mammalian cells, and it wants to include fixation options, antibiotic dilution ranges, recommended controls. So making sure to ask for things like that. So once you have a protocol that you want to start editing, there's a variety of things that you can add into it. And so this is an example of different components you can add into your protocol. I'm in the protocol editor right now. I can add in different sections and steps. Make sure to explore these tabs along the top where you can add other information. And then here on the right, this is where I can add in components. And so these are where specific important information can be called out. So you can add things like amounts, specific reagents with all of the associated information with that reagent, times, temperatures. And when you do put these things into the component format, it can be one, helpful for the broader reproducibility. And two, it's a lot easier for the system to read. And then you can, for example, scale those amounts up and down. And we'll see that in a moment. So I won't go through this in a bunch of detail because we're only in an introductory session today, but you can see the kind of information that you can put into the protocol. These are like blank fields that would need to be filled out when someone was executing the method. Images, videos. We've got this table with formulas. And so one of the benefits as well of putting all of this information into one place is that you don't have, for example, a Word document with the steps and then a separate Excel file with calculations. So you can have it all in one place so it's easily findable. All right, so what we can do as well is we can run this protocol. So if I click view, it will take me out of edit mode and it will give me the opportunity to view a protocol. And then I can click run. So I won't run this protocol. I've already got one prepared. And when I run this protocol, it's going to turn it into a checklist that I can mark off as I'm completing each of those steps. So I can come here, I can click done. It's marking when that's been completed, it's been completed by. And so we can see with this step, for example, I can also modify each of the steps if I am making any specific changes on that day. And it's only going to change the run record. It won't change the underlying protocol. And I can come in while I'm editing this step and I can click on settings and, for example, scale those amounts because they're in that component format. I can run that timer and I've already filled this out, but I could, for example, fill out this information here. Hopefully, if we're making a solid solution, it's going to be colorless. You can also add in any observations in comments on those steps as well. And then once I've drafted my protocol, maybe I've used it a little bit, validated that it's working in and documented that in a run, I might want to come back and eventually publish that. And so you can see this is what people would be able to see if I publish this protocol. So I can click this publish button and it's a very short five-step process. We're just making sure that you've added some authors, added funders, and any other relevant information. And then once you publish it, we go through, there's about a 24 to 48-hour moderation process. This is where we just screen out pseudoscience or spam, and then you will be published on protocols.io and you will receive a DOI. Also, if you do want to receive a DOI immediately, what you can do is click on this reserve DOI button. So then you'll get the DOI immediately and you can choose to publish your protocol at a later date. Maybe you took that DOI, you put it in your paper, and then you publish the protocol at the same time as your paper. One thing to keep in mind with the reserve DOI is that if we do detect that DOI in the published literature, we will automatically publish your protocol. So make sure you do that if you know that you're happy for that to happen. So with that being said, that's a little bit of an introduction to Protocol Studio, how you can create and publish protocols. I know a lot of the examples that I've shown are a little bit more biology and wet lab focused, but we do welcome protocols from all research disciplines, and we do see um, people from across disciplines sharing their methods on Protocol Studio. This is a protocol that we've created with some examples from different research areas. So if you are in any one of these, you can check those out. I will put that into the chat as well. All right, so I've got a couple more slides and then I will open the floor to questions. I see we've got some in the chat, so that's great. Um, okay. So these are just some more examples as well from that link that I already shared of kind of methods that are beyond traditional wet lab research. One other thing to call out as well, I can, of course, only cover so much in a 1 hour webinar, but we do have lots of resources where you can get further help. So on our help center, we have short video tutorials. You can, of course, always ask us questions as well. And then you would know about our webinars because you're attending one today. So they run across multiple time zones. We have other topics that you might be aware of. And if you don't want to wait for the next webinar, you can access the past webinars as well in the other topics as you're exploring Protocol Studio. To finish off, it is a good time to start thinking about getting to know these sorts of platforms and sharing your research, sharing your methods more openly. So there are more and more journals that are recommending to put your methods onto Protocol Studio when publishing. So as we already touched on earlier, they're not just Springer Nature journals. There are many other publishers as well, and there's over 1,000 journals so far that recommend that. There's also various funders that are mandating that if they are funding your work, you need to be sharing your methods openly on platforms such as Protocol Studio. And this funder here, ASAP Parkinson's, they actually say that you must put your protocols on protocols.io if you are being funded by us, and then they provide support to their grantees to Premium Protocol Studio support to enable their grantees to do that. And there are also universities that provide full access to the private side of Protocol Studio to promote better methods documentation and open sharing within the universities. So what you can do is you can check if your organization has Premium Protocol.io. So you can go to protocol.io/for institutions and check in if your institution is listed in this dropdown. We are also a Research for Life partner. So if you are in any of the countries shown in blue here, then you automatically have full access to Premium Protocols.io. And so I will also put a link in the chat to that if anyone who is attending is in that situation. But just to stress as well, so you can, if you don't have Premium Protocols.io, you can still create private protocols in that structured format. You can still publish them. You can still build upon other people's work. So the Premium Protocols.io is really if you wanted to have you were more interested in private methods collaboration and creating a private repository of your methods for your group or organization. So thank you very much for listening. I will start answering the questions in the chat now. While I am answering questions, I would also like to ask that people fill out the webinar feedback survey. So it really helps us make sure that the information we include in the webinars is as helpful as possible for you. So I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's have a look at the chat now. And I'll try and start at the top. Okay, I see one question from Frank. What limitations are there for the amount of data that you can upload to a workspace? So, if you're talking about just like the data and space that your protocols take up, so it depends on if you are on a free or premium workspace. So on a free workspace, I think it's 100 megabytes. And so that would be, of course, private protocols that are taking up your workspace. And then if it's a premium workspace, it's around 10 gigabytes. But as far as I know, the protocols are like quite small, and so no one's ever gone over that amount in a workspace. One thing I do want to say is that I'm not sure if your question is around uploading large amounts of, for example, data sets. So I'll just like to mention that Protocols.io is specifically for storing and publishing methods. If you are looking for a place to store really large amounts of data, then you might want to look at other platforms. We might not be the exact place for that. Hope that answered your question, Frank. And then Salim, could the method of a previously published article be elaborated via Protocols.io and republished again? So yes, so if you've published a research paper and you've detailed method details in that paper and you say, I want to put those method details on Protocols.io so people can build upon them and it can be cited separately, yes, you can do that. And when you do that as well, on your protocol on Protocols.io, you can say it's from this manuscript and put the link in to the manuscript. The only thing to keep in mind is, of course, if people land on your already published manuscript, they might not necessarily know from that article that they could go to the Protocols.io version. But short answer to your question, yes, you can do that. All right, we've got a question from Caitlin. Are there any plans to expand Protocols.io into the bioinformatics space? Can I use it in combination with GitHub to publish pipelines? So we do see people use Protocols.io to detail like computational methods and in bioinformatics as well. So maybe you'll see some relevant protocols in those lists that I shared. And so what we see people do is they use Protocol Studio to detail all the work that's kind of happens around those computational pipelines. So you wouldn't put, so you can put like short snippets of code in Protocol Studio, but we're not going to be a replacement of GitHub. You were to put that in GitHub, and then you could, um, yeah, link to your GitHub repository within your Protocol Studio protocol, and talk about the methods, and steps that need to happen to, for example, if there was linking to certain software, how to install that. Um, I'll see if I can find a computational method that I can share, but they might be in that link as well, and then you can see what people have done. In terms of expanding into the bioinformatics space, if you have any like feedback or suggestions on like how we could um, how we could approach that. We're open to hearing them, but I think we already see people using it in that way. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Okay. All right. Thanks, Caitlin. So what I'll do actually is in that last, oh, I see there's one more by the Q&A. Oh, okay, that's the same question. I've already answered. Okay, great. So I'll stop sharing. And then I will find for you, Caitlin, while we've got a couple minutes, a nice computational protocol. As I know I've got one in my saved somewhere. But yeah, thank you everyone else for attending. Feel free to drop off as well. And um, if you haven't filled out the webinar feedback survey yet, we would really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Trying to find one for you, Caitlin. But it's taking me a moment. Let's see. So this one's not bioinformatics exactly, but it's a little bit more computational. And so you can see it's at a very beginner level. So we can, there's like screenshots of preparing the data. This isn't my background, so I'm not sure about the details of this protocol, but you can see, for example, how people are using Protocol Studio to share um, more computational information. But, they've used a command component here you could just as well link out to GitHub as well for longer code that people would need to run. I hope that is somewhat helpful for you. I'll put that into the chat as well. Okay. Um, Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.